Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with homemade flour tortillas. If you've never had homemade flour tortillas, you are in for a treat. They are nothing like what you get in the store. They're 1,000 times better. They are also super easy to make. In fact, the only tricky part is getting them rolled nice and thin. But we're not going to roll them. We're going to use this, a tortilla press. I'm using this Victoria model from Imusa, which they sent me to test a while back, and it worked fantastic. So first we got to make our tortilla dough. So I'm going to measure some flour into a bowl. You'll notice I'm using a scale. More accurate, of course, than cup measurements. I'll give you both on Food Wishes. But we're going to use a certain weight of white flour, all-purpose flour, some baking powder, some fine salt, table salt. All right, after the dry ingredients go in, I'm going to work a whisk through that, kind of to aerate it. If there's any chunks, got to break them up. You can also sift it, but I'm not a huge sifter. All right, then we're going to throw in some fat. I'm using plain vegetable shortening. Some people like to use lard. Some people like to use butter. Some people use a combination. I'm going to take my pastry cutter or pastry blender, which is that little wire thing, and simply work the fat into the flour until it resembles coarse crumbs. See that? All right. When it looks like that, stop. I'm going to make a well in the middle, to which I'm going to add hot water or very warm water. Not boiling, just hot water. Okay. I'm going to take a fork. I'm going to work that with the fork until it sort of comes together. I'm going to dump it on my cutting board, and I'm going to knead it for about 3 minutes to form a very smooth, fairly soft dough. Now this is not like a bread dough where you have to knead it for like 10 minutes. All right, we don't need like a really elastic dough. So just a few minutes usually takes care of it. All right, so that dough should easily pick up all the flour we used. If it starts to stick to the cutting board and all the flour's been used up, sprinkle a little more flour on. All right, you got to play it by ear when you make doughs. All right, so if it sticks, add a little more flour. By the way, I realized I was kneading kind of fast, so here's a little slow motion of my kneading technique. Pretty basic. You kind of smush it with the heel of your hand and then turn it over and do it again. All right, so I kept doing that, like I said, 3 or 4 minutes till I had something that looked and felt like that. At that point, I'm going to put a little more flour down on the board. I'm going to cover this with my bowl and let it rest 15 to 20 minutes. It's got to sort of relax. And what are you doing while it's relaxing? You relax. All right, so 15, 20 minutes later, I took off the bowl. You can use a knife. I'm using one of these dough scrapers. So I cut it in half, cut the half in half, cut the half in half. Translation, cut them into 8 semi-equal pieces. You could weigh them to make them all exactly the same, but that would just be, annoying. So close is fine for tortillas. All right, and then the only tricky part of the operation, rolling these nice and thin. If you have one of these, you don't have to do any rolling. This is a standard basic tortilla press. You got to put some plastic down, so I like to give it a little squirt of water, which holds the plastic in place. So I'm going to put plastic on the bottom plate, another piece on the top plate, put my dough ball in. Notice I have it sort of towards the back hinge, towards the back third. That's because it's going to press forward, and that tends to work a little easier. And then you just press the handle down. So easy. All right? Once it's pressed, we are ready to cook. And you can see how beautifully uniform and flat that comes. And you can do the same thing by rolling. You can. I've done it that way. This is just a lot easier and faster. All right, over to a dry pan. You can use a seasoned cast iron. You can use a non-stick like I'm using here on medium-high heat. You're going to throw it in for about a minute. When you see bubbles popping up like that, give it a flip. About a minute on that side. And you're going to see it may, and it probably will, start to inflate. All right, after about a minute on that side, I like to flip it over again and then watch. This is so cool. So it's about 3 minutes total. There's really no wrong way to do this. Some people just go like a minute and a half on each side. I like to do 2 flips. So a minute flip, and a minute flip. And that is done. Tortilla balloon. By the way, if you want to call this flatbread, call it flatbread. Really the same thing. All right, that's it. Done. So cool. So easy. And did I mention incredibly delicious? All right, so I did my 8. I piled them up on a plate with a towel over them to keep them warm. If you have a tortilla warmer, keep it in that. So supple, delicious, chewy, moist, tender. You got to try these. In fact, I was so excited to make these, I didn't even have anything to eat with them. I just ate them plain. True story. All right, so there you go. How to make fresh flour tortillas at home. If you have one of those tortilla presses like the Amusa version there I used, very, very simple. In fact, I'll put links to that in the blog post. If you don't, that recipe's still going to work. I hope you give it a try. All the ingredient amounts are on the site, as usual. And as always, enjoy.